And Johannesburg has a new mayor. Jama's Kabelo Gwamanda came out at the top for the mayor position after receiving 139 votes. He went head-to-head with the DA's Dr. Mpho and Action SA's Funzi Ngobeni. Johannesburg has been without a mayor for over a week after Thapelo Ahmed resigned.
Of those votes, Councillor Funzi Ngobeni, 59. Councillor Mpho Louisa Palate, 68. Councillor Kabelo Gwamanda, 139. The new executive mayor of the city of Johannesburg, Councillor Kabelo Gwamanda.
Now, the newly elected mayor, Kabelo Gwamanda, has announced members of his mayoral committee. The majority of the former mayor, Thapelo Ahmed's MCs, remain in their positions. Gwamanda did make one change to the portfolio of public safety. He's appointed Dr. Mningi Chwaku as the new MMC for public safety, replacing Sepetlele Rasidrute. Gwamanda opted to keep the committee the same because he's well aware of the conditions and challenges facing the residents of the city.
Mine as the executive mayor is to add but one priority that will serve to strengthen all 9 pillars of the GLU's strategic objectives. And that is to improve the quality of service as standard practice across all departments and entities. Our approach as government needs to be respectful to the resident and be resident-centric. We have to we as a government have to provide services that are at least worth paying for, rather than demand payment because it's legislated.
Gwamanda says they are open to working with all parties.
Our interest is for the city to succeed, and we are prepared to work with all political parties represented in council to ensure that all diverse citizens in the city of Johannesburg are serviced.
Let's get some reaction now. We're joined by Professor Dirk Kotze, who's a political analyst. A very good evening to you, Dr. Kotze. Thank you for your time. Now, the sitting of the turbulent City of Johannesburg Council was marred by a lot of chaos, some delays, leaving the country's biggest metro essentially leaderless for 2 days. But out of all the chaos, a new mayor has emerged. What do you make of him?
Yes, this to some extent is actually a surprise that it reached this point, because by yesterday it was still very unpredictable whether they will be able to elect a new mayor. I think the main change that has happened is the fact that the Patriotic Alliance voted together with the ANC and the EFF, Jama-ah and the other parties, and they were until very recently still trying to negotiate from outside for certain positions, including that of the mayor themselves. So what we are seeing now is, in a sense, that the ANC and its group prevailed, that they brought together again and consolidated around, especially the Patriotic Alliance, which is the third biggest party in this group. And then on the other hand, that the DA did not see eye to eye with Action SA, especially on the Patriotic Alliance. And therefore they formed these 2 voting blocks. But I think this was possibly also a strategy from the DA side, that they didn't want to come together into a consolidated group. And I think what was very significant is that all the coalition partners of the DA in, for example, Tshwane and other areas, have voted together with Action SA, not for the DA. So we will over time actually hear what exactly was the strategy here. With respect to the 2. But it's clear that the DA and Action SA, or that coalition, didn't try at all costs in order to to gain a majority, because then they would have accepted the Patriotic Alliance. And I
Does-
think for the future,
Yeah.
for the future, the main test will be is to what extent the Patriotic Alliance will stay loyal to the ANC's group.
Is this indicative at all of what we're likely to see as we move to election time and, the nature of coalitions, starts, the talks and the jostling starts to happen again?
No, I don't think so. I think what we see at local government level as its dynamics of its own, for example, a party like the Patriotic Alliance will next year not play at all a national role, maybe even not a provincial role. So they will not be in the equation that we are seeing at the moment in Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni, for example. What we will see next year is that the bigger parties will play a more prominent role. And this array of small parties that we see in many local authorities that have sometimes the decisive vote or the decisive decision will obviously not play that same role at national and provincial level. So what we are also seeing now is the ANC announced its principles or guidelines for coalition government. The DA has done the same. And they are working towards more stabilizing and creating new dynamics for coalition governments at national and provincial level because of the lessons that they are learning and have learned already with local government.
So what does the build-up to this decision indicate about the behind-the-scenes jostling, the tussle for power between the ANC and its minority party allies, which has led to a series of adjournments in the chambers in the past days?
Well, I think it was a lot about the Patriotic Alliance. I don't want to overemphasize it, but they were a key issue in the past week at least. They were at some stage, Kenny Kunene was presented as actually the mayoral candidate for Johannesburg. So we are seeing they try to position themselves and to gain the ultimate out of this situation.
Yeah.
But I think what we are going to see now afterwards is that there's already been indication that the ANC nationally is going to meet with the ANC in Gauteng, because this appointment now goes against the guidelines that the ANC announced for local government in the form by David Makhura, the former premier who's now in the ANC's top leadership in the Tuli House dealing with these matters. So they will have to explain why they have opted for this choice of using a small party like Jama-ah in order to continue. They've done it also lately in Mogale City and earlier on in Ekurhuleni, and continue with this. Because strictly speaking, the coalition must evolve around the ANC and the EFF, and to some extent the Patriotic Alliance in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened. The reason for that, they will have to explain to the mother body, to the ANC in general, why they are not following this, because it can be ultimately be detrimental. We have to remember ourselves that the ANC at provincial level at the moment in Gauteng has a majority of only one seat in the provincial legislature.
So it was reported that the ANC caucus did raise issues about Gwamanda's candidacy, but the party was barred by the new framework, which states that the biggest party in a coalition should be elected mayor. But the ANC apparently had very little room to change its posture because of an agreement with the EFF. How crucial is the ANC's relationship with the EFF?
No, it is absolutely crucial because the EFF has 29 seats in Johannesburg, so the ANC depended on the cooperation of the EFF. We have seen it also in the case of Ekurhuleni, that where the ANC and the EFF together constituted the majority. So if it wasn't for the EFF's cooperation in this case, they would not be able to establish a new coalition government. And I think this is where we must look for the answer, is to what extent is there already an established relationship between the ANC and the EFF, or whether it is still an evolving relationship. And because of that, they have to have almost an interim arrangement with these smaller parties in the key positions of mayor as well as speaker, in the case of Johannesburg also.
So Gwamanda's rise to leadership, of course, follows the resignation of his fellow party member, Kabelo, who left office ahead of a vote of no confidence last week. This essentially means the city has just chosen its 9th executive mayor in just 7 years. What will he need to do differently?
I'm sorry to say, but he doesn't have any powers or any status to do something differently. He's going to be caught in the dynamics of the main parties, and that's the ANC, the EFF, and to some extent the Patriotic Alliance. He's not going to be an executive mayor. He's going to be actually interim mayor. He's not going to have executive positions on which he can determine or provide the leadership. He's filling this position simply because the ANC and the EFF at this stage are not yet in a position where they can actually identify the real leadership that must move forward. And I think this is the predicament of what we've seen now lately is that our Jama-ah, for example, with only 3 seats out of 270 in the council, is such a small party. It simply does not have any power in order to fill such a position and make it their own.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much. Let's perhaps leave it there for now, Professor.